of that community and help to break down some of those barriers. So I encourage you to stay for the event afterwards and do that networking. Here to lead this conversation, we are really privileged to have a woman who is the CEO and co-founder of Level Forward. Please join me in welcoming Adrienne Becker.
Hi. How are you all? Excellent. I've heard a tremendous amount of talent is in this room, and I'm super excited and honored to be with all of you. Last night I had the pleasure of listening to Leslie Odom Jr. sing at a private fundraiser for Alzheimer's funds, and he was introduced by the MC of the night and said, you are now all going to be in the room where it happens, and everyone laughed, and I thought to myself, tomorrow night, I will be in the room where it happens because we are fighting a different kind of revolution. And tonight we have the privilege of speaking with 4 women who are leading that revolution. And just to set the stage a little bit, is it okay if I bring them out for this? Okay. So if everyone could come out, we have Sheila Driscoll, who is you may recognize her name because it's on the sweetest berries in town. But in addition to being a purveyor of the finest, she is an activist, she is a philanthropist, she is an entrepreneur, she is co-founder and president of the Billionaire Foundation. She started the Women Impact Entertainment Fund, and she is also a partner in a new endeavor called Sisters First, which she's going to tell us about. We have Anita, who is we traveled all the way from Taiwan just to be here with us tonight. No, not really. She's been here for a couple of days. But she has become a real force in women-led financing. She is a producer and financier behind Honey Boy, Assassination Nation, and has coming July 21st, the Farewell with none other than Aquafina. We have Deb McIntosh, who is a partner at Endeavor Content, and she has been involved in some of my favorite films, Colette, Beatrice at Dinner, The Kindergarten Teacher, and the big one, La La Land. The best fact about Deb is that she did start in the mailroom at William Morris. And we have Viviana Zarragoitia, who has been in film financing for the past almost 15 years, was at Bold Films, and is our resident expert on debt financing, and is going to be elucidating that black box for us here tonight. So just to take stock, as Kristen mentioned, we have, if you look back at the top 50 grossing films of the last year, not one of them had gender parity amongst crew, not one of them had gender parity amongst HODs, not one of them had a Latina woman in a college-educated or professional position, and only 5 of them had a black woman represented in a healthy relationship or in a position of power. And that's because we largely still have men calling the shots, and they're mostly white men, and they're mostly cisgender, heteronormative, all those things that are not a part of the margins. And women are still a part of the margin in our business. And it shouldn't come as a surprise because there is a 20% threshold, as we all know, in most every industry. And that goes DPs on out. And when thinking about why that is, it may be helpful to look at the adjacent and relevant industry for tonight's conversation, which is the world of finance. Harvard Business School just did a study and found that only 9% of senior leaders in banking are women out of 100. only 6% of women, 6% of senior positions in venture capital firms are held by women. And in the wonderful world of hedge funds, it's 3%. And we wonder why this is, but we know the answers. And the biggest answer has to do with gender parity as it relates to the wage gap. So in banking, there is a near 50% gap between men and women in our wages. When it comes to bonuses, it's about 70%. And yet, there are more women earning college degrees than ever before. So something is happening between our education and our promotion. And that may have a lot to do with culture, that may have a lot to do with transparency, that may have something to do with motherhood, and more. And it all adds up to job satisfaction that's not getting us to break this 20% threshold. So to start tonight, I would love to throw it first to Deb. And Deb, if you could help us set the table, kind of from where we've come. For all of us, if this were 5 years ago and we were trying to get our films made, what would that process have been like for us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. First, I'm very honored and excited to be here with you tonight and look forward to a really fun, insightful conversation about everything going on in 2019. But to look back at 2014, we saw an environment and film finance raising that was primarily still predicated on a very stable, at the time, international sales business that, looked at films as a, 60 to 70% internationally led financial opportunity, with domestic being a big fat zero in finance plans, as in, like, I'm not sure what's going to happen there. And if you think about it, in that time we were just coming out of the woods of the financial crisis and a lot of loss in independent arms at the studios, and so a bunch of new distributors were just coming onto the horizon and starting to change the way we look at film distribution. So film finance models were pretty predictable. Internationally sales-driven titles like Chef and Birdman and Boyhood's an anomaly, but I was looking at the list just now of 2014's top-grossing independent films, and those were a couple of the highest ones, and they had cast, St. Vincent with Bill Murray, that had the ability to be sold internationally based on purely their existence in the film. And then it was, we'll look at who's the filmmaker, and then we'll look at what the genre is. And you would get international sales estimates from some of the top international sales companies around town, take them to a 3-point capital or to a bank and get them lended against and papered, and you would do pre-sales in a market like Cannes, which we're about to go into. And all of that would allow for a finance plan that at least had some security to it, which we started to see eroded over the next 5 years as some of these titles didn't work and international sales changed, and we're in a much different place now. But that's the way it looked in 2014.
Yeah, I think adding to that, pretty much the pre-sale market is virtually non-existent, or at least diminishing quite rapidly year on and year out. I've been at 3.6 years. When I started, most films had 1 pre-sales, and that would cover at least half of your budget, depending on the package, who your talent was, who your director was. Most films that I see now, the debt that we provide is tax credits are becoming increasingly important in the financial plan. And whereas before you could even fully debt finance some films, now they always require a component of equity. So a lot of the films we do, there's an equity component that another party is bringing in, and we're financing a tax incentive. If there are pre-sales, we make those as well. But that's sort of the change that has occurred in the past few years.
Well, you both kind of touched upon cast, and I think it's a really both practical and idealistic position that filmmaker is in weighing, do I cast for pre-sales? Do I cast for an international market? Or do I cast for who I know will play the part as best as I know they can play it? So I'm curious, how have those weights changed over the past several years?
I think the cast is really dependent on which budget you're targeting. Ideally, if you're in an independent film and you're trying to get a big A-list actor, you should be getting them for scale because they want to be in your film because it's a role they're being offered that they don't normally get and they want to jump on it. So,
Or they want to also be an owner in the film's outside.
correct.
You know.
Yeah, they want to produce it and they want to have their hand in it. So I think it depends which budget level you're targeting and therefore which cast you're attracting. Your budget should not, it may go up a little bit depending on cast, but it should really sort of, if you're doing a much lower budget film, you can get somebody that maybe isn't as well known, but who is just gonna do a great job because the films at lower budgets, you're really trying to showcase the filmmaker at that point. And you're trying to make it for as little as you can because then whatever sale you make, you can increase your profitability.
Right, and I think if you think about the genre of these films and what their typical performance is in the marketplace, even in 2019, 2018, what are we seeing films do that, you know, are in the drama, in the comedy, and the action level, and try and, you know, comp them to that. When I'm talking to financiers about why they should invest in a film at a certain budget level, we're often looking at not just who the actors are anymore, but like what type of movie is it and how's it doing, who wants to go see this, who's going to see this, and by going to see it, you're also saying who's going to watch it on streaming platforms or other places besides the movie theater.
So let's talk about equity then, and come over to this side of the panel. You know, our experience with equity when this is about 2 years ago when we went to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire the Weinstein assets. There was a very small group of men that could write those checks in a matter of days, and a minuscule number of women and a minuscule number of people of color. And that very narrow base of capital seems to be the biggest cog in the wheel, which is why we have to continue to make super deliberate choices about what stories we tell. We have the circle on the glass wall, the conference room at level 4, if you've ever been there, you know, what stories are we telling, who's telling them, how are we valuing those people, how are they getting access to those jobs, education, workforce training, how are we distributing the product, getting it to audiences who need it the most and sometimes have the least amount of access, what do you do with the profits, and if you can put profits back into the system, can you slowly start to broaden that base of capital? So as two equity financiers of that old system, how did equity play a role then? And we can start moving towards the inflection point of the past couple of years.
I addressed it a little bit differently because I found that private equity into the film business is important. You've got to focus on, I'll talk as an investor because I'm always pitched as an investor. So what am I looking at when you come to me? And I'm probably gonna go a little bit the long way around. With the money components, I think the big cog in the wheel is when filmmakers come to me, they say, well, you know, this film just might not make the money that we're looking at.
Honest.
Honest. Yes. And so when I hear that, the first red flag goes up is that, well, then you're telling me not to invest in your film. So how are we going to address this? Here's what I'll say. Ladies, when you come to me, tell me what you're doing. That's the most important thing I want to hear from you. What will you be doing? If you have a slate, come to me with just one of those movies and tell me, here's my idea, here's how I want to develop it, here's the budget that I formulated for it. If you work with me and get this off the ground and this becomes successful, then we'll go to the next film. And then the next film. So you're not coming at me because everybody comes with me at a slate of 7 films.
Taking notes.
Right.
Or a limited series.
Or a limited series. Limited series. And so now I'm on your side. So what I'll do is I'll take a look at it and say, okay, now tell me about your product placement. Tell me about your P&A. Tell me about these things, because this is what's going to sell me. Remember, coming to me, you have to sell it for more than you made it. And with that in mind, if you're telling me, well, it might not make money, it isn't an investment.
Some good basic math in that. There was one other person who told me to make sure that we sell it for more than it costs us to make it, and that was Barry Diller. So you guys have something in common.
Yes.
So Sheila, can we just stay with you for one second, because you've been in business and film and storytelling for so much of your career, and I'm wondering to put this moment into context for us all, because we see signs of shift, but for everyone out there who's working on their pitch and going around and hustling to do everything they can to get their films made, it's still very difficult. And there are only so many Sheilas, Anitas, Debs, Vivianas level forwards to say yes, and it puts a lot of pressure on the system. Can you look at this moment now and talk about why this is different, if it is different? How do you see that?
Yes, because I think in the past, we as women tend to feel that we have to do it all by ourselves. And we're kind of educated and geared that way. And I think the shift that I've seen is we are now moving, and I'll talk a little bit about what I've done with that. We're moving from competing to collaborating. And as women, we do this intuitively. And I think we're going to get much more accomplished as we get together. Now, the trick is, ladies, you're going to have to learn how to network in a very male-dominated field. And I go to a lot of conferences, and I speak a lot. And it was interesting, because the last panel I spoke on in Dubai, the gentleman who announced the women on the panel, we were women of influence in the world, laughed. Okay. So, to address that, I thought, well, how am I going to figure this out? How can I help all of you? And like you said, how can you come to me? How can you find me? One of the things that I have done is, with my foundation, if you Google it, my email address is on it, and so is my phone number. There is a reason for that. I am here to serve you. Period. End of report.
Thank you. Let's get those typewriters out. Okay, well, with that, Anita, no pressure to give your email address or your phone number right now. But Anita, you have been one of the producers, financiers to really come into your own here in the past several years. You've had tremendous success. You know how to pick them. Can you talk about why this moment, kind of what's changed for you? Because I think you're on the cusp of kind of the innovation in women-led financing.
And not on wood, but I think it's, a lot of what's we've already discussed. I feel like right now it's a very experimental phase for a number of reasons, right? The paradigm of financing, right? When we shifted from being able to depend on primarily foreign sales, now equity is much more important, foreign sales not so much anymore, and to all the way to distribution where, the new platforms, right, this platform race, right, is disrupting every sort of aspect of filmmaking is being disrupted in good ways and bad ways. So I feel like it's a moment where some of these old rules are kind of just thrown out the window because you very much see them not working anymore. So the statistics are coming out to kind of say there's no more excuses in being lazy and leaning on sort of the old ways of doing things. So I think just in that atmosphere, you're more able to, or I feel like I've been more able to you know, and look at projects that are more like that, right? That don't fit the mold, don't have comps in a more traditional sense. But everyone starts somewhere. I like to, you know, work with new filmmakers because it's much more exciting to me to work with somebody and see them make their first film or second film and sort of get on that stage for the first time, and then everyone starts recognizing their name, and same with actors. You know, that's more exciting to me than, oh, how much is this actor going to get us in, you know, Europe and Asia, you know, and then that's a pattern, but you don't get to start having a pattern if you don't start somewhere. And so I feel like the trade-off is I look at films that have lower budgets, right? Because you always have to sort of, you know, think about risk assessment, especially from our point of view, but from the filmmaker point of view too, because, and I love what Sheila was saying, is, you know, I think it's very important to think about money and financiers as a long-term relationship you want to build, right? And especially in the context of what we're talking about here, for female filmmakers to get in the system, start building longevity, and start, you know, just really chipping away at the progress. You have to build those long-term relationships. It's not about your first film. You have to make your second and third, and then you get to the studio level, and you keep, you know, sort of get on that trajectory that men, right, have just up until this point been much, you know, in an easier way been able to do. So I think that's very important to do. So thinking about, you know, you might be doing something that is a little bit, you know, groundbreaking in its own way. You feel like you haven't been done before, serving some sort of purpose, some message, but think about what, like what Deb's saying, you know, think about where that could sit in the marketplace, right? If it's a new financing model that you're putting together. I think that's very important for both sides too.
But
I think that's incredibly important because as a financier, I would always rather work with somebody that I've already worked with because I already know what to expect. And most of the clients where we have a lot of, you know, most of our business, half of it is one-offs, half of it is pre-established relationships. It's always better to move into the pre-established relationships because you already know that they can complete a film on time, on budget. They're going to pay back the loan. They're going to be responsive. So I think that's incredibly important.
yeah. Well, I think what you've done incredibly well, just to say it, is like looked at some of these movies in a way that says there's an audience here being underserved, or at least I know there's a certain amount of people who are going to want to see this, from Assassination Nation that targeted a much younger audience, that, you know, I think it was a very interesting film and a very strong film, and there's other things to say about the distribution on it, but like, I think that film was a smart move, and I think that films like To the Bone, which went to Netflix and said to young women, like, look, you're not alone in your struggle here, and all the way to The Farewell, which said there's a very underserved Asian community out there that, you know, we'll see the release on it, but I think it's going to do very well, knock on wood. But I think Sundance shows you, like, look, there's an appetite there, there's a real enthusiasm for seeing these narratives out there, which has been really, like, I think, a testament to why you can invest in movies like these and see them work. It is, you know, it's a paradigm of repeat business for sure. And so I think when, like I said earlier, you're thinking about how much should I make my movie for, you have to think about who is it for, and are they seeing movies, and how widely are they seeing them? Are they going to theaters, or would a platform be, you know, I have to think about, is a platform going to make more sense when I'm figuring out deal structures?
We're going to transition a little bit towards what's happening that's innovative. But I think one of the innovations is that we've learned a lot from venture capital models and technology investing models, and some of it applies to entertainment investing. And I think one of the tenets of that kind of investing is very relevant for this audience, for all of us. And I'll explain this through an example. We had a woman come into our office. She served in the military for several years, and she tried to pitch her film almost 70 times in Hollywood to different investor, financiers, packagers, agencies, everything, and could not get the conversation going. And she is clearly very talented, but she didn't know anyone, didn't fit the mold. And she started pitching her film to us, and right away that I knew that this was someone that we were going to greenlight in this meeting. And it had very little to do with the actual film and had a lot to do with her. And so one of the tenets of investing that I've learned over the years is that you are investing in the creator. You are investing in the storyteller, the entrepreneur, and whatever it is that they're deciding to focus on right now is almost secondary. And we went ahead and we shot her film. We just saw the first assembly. We haven't announced it yet, and it's fantastic. I can't tell you the joy on her face and like how rewarding that in and of itself was, but I realized when I was preparing for this that we've just finished shooting 3 films, and they're all 3 first-time feature film scripted directors, which is really incredible. And I'm curious, on the equity side, how much stock do you put in the person versus the project? And on the debt side as well, I'm curious how much weight you put into the people sitting before you. You just talked about the reliability. So talk a little bit more about that. But Sheila, let's start with you.
For me, I invest in the person. I absolutely, and to my colleagues' points, because why? We're going to continue to build a relationship and make more films. And it's a business principle, ladies and gentlemen. You invest in the people, not the product. Why? Because we're going to have that long-term relationship to develop. Also, you're going to bring more things. As you grow, we grow. Your market grows. And that's important for any investor. So, definitely.
How does Sister, can you, since we're segueing into innovation, I'm just curious, can you tell us what Sisters First is and how Sisters First is a vehicle for some of the things you've already spoken about?
Sure. So Sisters First came about in 2016 by literally 2 sisters, the early sisters. One was an entertainer and one was a writer, and they're very young women. I back young women, and I back young writers, and I back young performers, and especially women who have the foresight and the goals and the beliefs in themselves that they can do it. Again, this is where investing in women and investing in the people that come to our company. So with Sisters First Productions, what we did is we created an entertainment production and asset management company, and we blended the 2 together. So I work with the top people that were the Wall Street geniuses, the hedge funds, gurus, all of that. And they came to me and put together kind of 3 vehicles. One is your standard PE, or your private equity, that people can invest in. They also, now we're adding the technology component in, STO, standard tokenized options to put in. So now you can tokenize. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is now a matter of fact. It will now start to infiltrate into the entertainment world, so we're kind of staying ahead of that. And then also another component that we put in is also giving back. Part of what the ladies were saying of what do you do with those proceeds, those profits? They go back to supporting the higher good, the foundation work. So with this, these gentlemen created a fund for me, which is now at 100 million. We're going to grow it to 300 million. Here's the most important. The money's for you. The women that are attached are proven in their field. So, for example, we did what they call FTT, film, television, and theater. So, as I carefully went through my film world, who would be representative of each of these categories? And who has a good heart? Who are women that have been in the business, have the Tonys, Oscars, Emmys, but that are also willing to do what I always say, Jack Lemmon told Kevin Spacey, to send the elevator back down, right? And this is where we're going to collaboration. So this is what we've done. So for right now, we're lulling Adrienne and Becker to come on to represent documentary.
Disney.
Disney.
Minor detail that
Just a minor one, for documentary. Marina Martins has come on with Pigmental Studios for animation. Bonnie Conley and Stu Lane, Mr. and Mr. Broadway, have come on for theater. And right now I was just speaking today with Cinda Blake to come on for television. So what are we doing? We have women from all different parts of the world, different nations, women of color, that will come together now, and we will fund their projects. They put no money into this. This is what's different. They no longer have to bang on the doors, but their projects have to be good, obviously. But what's the overlay here? Not only have we this structure, we've infused AI technology. So the requirements for the women to participate in this fund is to give us what they need, what they have seen works, what's the tried and the true. We feed the machine the AI technology. So what we're doing is we're looking at what's faster, better, cheaper, but as the technology develops, this will enable them to work better or choose better, and also open the fields up. So that's part, yeah.
Thank you, Sheila. Anita, can you tell us what's happening on the fronts of innovation at Kindred Spirits?
I think, it's just going off of what I said earlier, the experiment, right? It's, and the fact that everything has to start somewhere. Deb was very kind of bring up, for example, my film that will be out, most recently on July 12th, The Farewell, that's what we call an American independent film, but it's 80% in Mandarin language. And that was something that when I came out here, it was sort of a dream of mine to do something like that, where you kind of look at a landscape of content consumption now, and have we moved beyond the sort of the borders of subtitles, right? Of online consumption. If that's helping evolve the way we consume sort of longer form content, and so, but it's a lot of steps, right, to chip away at, where to get the film made and then accepted at a festival and then to sell to a major distributor, and now we're at the final stage of can this work in the marketplace, and fingers crossed, but I think but at the very beginning stages, it's about finding that filmmaker who was brave about telling her personal story and being specific about her personal story in a very honest way that I think transcended whatever specific cultures are in there, languages in there. I think it always comes back to the person and then what product that person is able to come up with, because I think it's all sort of execution dependent. For you to experiment, you still have to pay very much attention to the filmmaking of it, the structure of it. Are you telling a good story? Those fundamental things help you access your audience, right? And what you were saying earlier about the films that you guys are finishing right now with first-time filmmakers, and so that's the space I like to work in too, because but I think it's similar to what you guys are doing. It's very important to me to look at commerciality, even with first-time, second-time filmmakers. And I don't care if it's your 10th, your films have to reach an audience, even if it's your little niche audience, but they have to love it, they have to talk about it, they have to tweet about it. I feel like that's how you get to the next film, that's how you start building your career. So, I think the mediums are all blending together, right? Film, TV, theater, everyone's sort of talent moves in different directions now. So innovation's happening in all those places, but at the end of the day, you still have to figure out who your audience is, no matter the scale of it.
How did The Farewell come to you? What was that pitch like? What was that process like? How did that come to fruition?
Yeah, well, The Farewell was fortunate because the writer-director had already gone on This American Life and told the story in a podcast format. which then my producing partners who became my producing partners had heard it and developed it into a script. It was a very short amount of time for it, and then I had been putting the message out there of wanting to look for projects that have this sort of East and West element, but and dealt with culture that way, and so there's really not a lot of them, which is also why I focus a lot of my resources on development too, and it's very key to generate even projects that are different, right? You have to start from the very beginning. So it was all very fortuitous, I think, in that regard. But it took, I think, people like us sitting here, but also people who are allies, right? Who don't relate on a personal level, maybe, in terms of identity, but because as equity, and especially for me, I always look for partners to work with, right? And so I think that's the way these ideas can spread, and then it becomes a track record for different companies who are not even just only focusing on women or people of color, that has to become normalized in that way, right? So, yeah.
So at level 4, we have a target on the wall that says in the middle of the target, you have to know someone. Mm-hmm. And because I've been on conference calls where the partner has said, well, as long as you know them, and it's a double-edged sword, because we now have, we're making strides for women, but not all women. And Viviana, I'd love to hear from your perspective on the debt side, what's happening with women of color as they apply for debt financing? What more can we be doing to create on-ramps and build broader networks that are more inclusive?
I rarely get women of color come to me, so it's a tough question too.
Well, that's interesting in and of itself. Why do you think that is?
I think it's sort of the you have to know someone. It's sort of how do you create those opportunities to access. So I think it's creating those bridges to do that. Like the collaboration that we're talking about is incredibly important. I'll give the example of a film that you and I spoke about on the phone called Pimp that we financed, and it's about a lesbian pimp in New York. Women of color, also lesbian. It's touching all of these minority boxes. A film that, for a year and a half after it was made, couldn't get distribution and went to a bunch of festivals. Finally, Showtime picked it up. But what was interesting about the film is the director was a woman, most of the cast, the lead cast were women, but the financing was all arranged by a white man. So, and again, it goes back to he had the relationships with the financiers to be able to get that movie off the ground. So, whereas he's a good friend, and I applaud the fact that he's championing those voices, how do we get, a minority woman to be that person? And I think it's very hard. I mean, I sort of think, change starts from within. So me being in the position I am, I try to purposely look for women that I can work with, or women who, haven't had access to these sorts of positions, to be able to champion them and to get them in those inroads.
I think one of the things you can do as well, or that you should strive to work for when you get on set, is adopting things like the inclusion writer, because then you're asking your partners to put down in writing, which at Endeavor Content we have adopted it. You can get a diverse crew base, and then once those people are given that chance, then they'll be hired again and again and again, and you're seeing different people in the room because of innovation and adopting of new policies, because it can be pretty formalized too. It doesn't just require like saying, oh, you have to network and get to know people. You can also, demand, if you're in that position of control as the filmmaker or the producer, that your partners work under these new rules that are out there and being set up.
Yeah, we have equity language in all of our deals that say that we will walk away if we don't see a set that reflects the substance of the film. And we have walked away recently. I'm going to take a bold move here and challenge the four of you in a productive way. So we have a little initiative that we've internally only called 52. And it means that every week for the next year, we want to meet a woman
of color that we don't know. And it doesn't mean that we are definitely going to make something, but we want to know them because we believe that that's half the battle. And I would ask all four of you if you would consider participating in this program with us. We can help set it up and take care of the administration of it, but if you would also be open to meeting with a different woman of color on the debt side, agency, equity, every week for the next year, schedule permitting.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to go now. Second time I've excused myself. So,
can I talk a little bit about the innovation at Deborah Content?
Yeah.
Just to be clear, we're actually now a separate company from the agency, as she's probably referring to William Morris and Deborah. We launched in 2017 as a new innovative affiliate production that is focused on backing other strong producer and filmmakers' plays. We don't take producer credits, for example. We are financiers, and we're also partners. My main role is raising money still, but Endeavor Content is an ecosystem that is focused on things like female-led content. We back a piece of Bruno Papadreou's company. We have a partnership with this company called One Community that's very focused on changing policy through film and television. We are, I think, innovating in a way that's saying to the community, we want to back these stories that that have an audience, that are making change out there. So, I think everybody is capable of innovation. A giant monolithic agency spurned out this brand new company that's part of creating a lot of different type of content out there now.
So let's talk about the number $100 million. There was a comment. There was a comment on. That's a good one, right? There was a comment on Variety, an article about buying the Weinstein assets, and some enlightened fellow wrote, "No one will ever give a woman $100 million to invest in entertainment."
Oh yeah. I hate to hear that.
You heard it here first. We're breaking news by the second. So what we did was we said, we can't play by the same rules. We've got to create a different model. So, and I was asked to just mention this. So we created this weird thing called the BIT. And the BIT is neither Film Fund or Slate. It is a different kind of portfolio. And we named it BIT because it's an acronym for the words Believe in This. And yes, we named an investment portfolio after an Alanis Morissette song, which is another thing I would like in my eulogy. The song is Forgiven, and she talks about going to church and being spoon-fed the beliefs, and now we are changing those beliefs. So the BIT has film, has television, has theater, the Tony-nominated Oklahoma, and the Tony-nominated What the Constitution Means to Me, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And the reason we structured it this way is because we believe that this is how the world consumes media, and it also enables us to make investments that fit within the context of this portfolio. So we have diversity of storytellers, diversity of genre, diversity of platforms, but that they all revolve around a common theme. So our first bit, which includes Jagged Little Pill musical, was around women and transformation. And the second bit is now about standing up for yourself so you can stand up for others. That model, when we started to talk about it, like you just had lawyers and financial advisors sitting there scratching their heads. And it's an example, I think, of something that only women would come up with because it's so different and it doesn't play by the rules. And I'm curious as to what other kinds of models you've heard about, whether it's something that One Community is doing or others that are challenging some of those kind of legal templates, which I think hold us back and hold all of us back because that's just the way, in the same way like you have to know someone, well that's just, we don't do it that way. How many times have you heard that?
Definitely. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think, I could have saved my Deborah content part for this bit. It feels like there's a moment now where you want to be part of, as somebody who, raises money, you want to be part of helping people and backing people and having partners that are part of things that do challenge the status quo because they're working over and over again. And one of the films that I was fortunate to sell in Sundance a couple years ago was Searching, that John Cho stars in, an entirely Asian cast, and that broke box office expectations massively. And I think that was a really good example of saying, hey, look, these movies have an audience, and we're not serving them well. There should be more of those coming out, and we're constantly on the prowl for those. Many different partners that we work with are looking for the exact same thing and really want to, not necessarily just Asian-focused content, but movies that are not serving, and I've said it many times already up here, they're serving an underserved audience. They're out there trying to create, a new example. Because if you don't have an example, it's hard to point to something that is different. So anyway, I think One Community is a good example of a company that has a mission statement of being a part of film and television content that can change policy in America. Scott Budnick is a successful producer. The Hangover franchise is one of the things he's most known for, who has a deep passion for seeing recidivism reduced in America's prison system. And so he started a company called the Anti-Recidivism Coalition that focuses on getting people coming out of the prison system jobs, and in all different types of industries, but he's gotten several different studios to sign up for hiring interns that are out of the prison system. So he's been backing content that focuses on anti-recidivism. He's also interested in content that focuses on, for example, changing people's opinions of the foster care system in America, or, bettering people's lives through civic engagement. Anything that has sort of a stickiness to it about policy change in America, or in the world, but right now pretty focused on America. So I think, hearing pitches like that from different people that want to start those types of companies is really exciting to not just Endeavor Content, but a lot of the people we work with right now. Brennan Papandreou's new company, Made Up Stories, is focused on female-centric stories, and most of these are going to be directed by women, but she's open if the content comes with a male director to having that conversation. But I think it's about putting women at the center and really allowing us to tell our narratives in a new way, and in a way that's supported financially.
Great. Can we talk about negotiating?
Yeah.
Because I think it's something that everyone in this room should get really comfortable with, which is advocating on behalf of yourself. Sheila, as someone who I suspect has negotiated many a deal, $100 million, you got to negotiate a lot of deals. What wisdom can you impart upon us about your experience, and what should we know to do when we get in the room?
Excellent question, and I think here's where favor falls to me when I'm in front of people that are pitching me. I want you to come in, and I want you to tell me what your market size is, that you've done your homework, how you are going to make the investors the money back. But here's what's, I think, probably for me, what's the most important, and where you'll absolutely have me sit up. Tell me what you don't know. Tell me what your shortcomings are, saying, I have a great cast, but I really would need help with a good lighting crew, a good stage, good whatever. Tell me what you're missing. That's the most important part, because I can probably help you fill in those gaps. But what are you telling me? You're telling me that you don't know it all, that you're not slick. You're not going to sell me the next Wonder Woman, and I did work on Wonder Woman. So I would say that, for me, is what's most important. Because again, we go back to, we're gonna form this relationship, we're gonna build on your next film, we're gonna get more money to do it. And I think the two most important principles, and I'll always ask women this, primarily in film, what do you want to accomplish? Number one. Number two, what is your motivation? You better get out of that room, and I better know those two things. Those are what I will ask you. And then I'll take it from there. Because I have to know you know what you want and what you can do. You're not a charity case. You need help, we're here to help. But tell me what you need.
Anita, what have you learned in the negotiating process?
Building off of Sheila, it's, to me, you know, in the process of getting to know whether it's a filmmaker who's coming to me or a producer coming to me, it's, if I can see that they understand motivation, right? If there's a sense of purpose, and it can be very grand, like changing the world. It can be very small, like you know, highlighting this little community that nobody knows about. But it has to feel like the project should exist and for a reason, and you should be able to identify that for me, you know, and then pinpoint something about your project that feels fresh, like you're challenging a rule and you're doing something in a new way. What's something that can hit culture in that way and start conversations, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't know if people are gonna love what you end up making. It's so subjective, but the worst crime, I think, is, you know, to have nobody care about what you made. They can hate it and love it, but whatever the reaction is, there should be a reaction. So can you get ahead of that and sort of foresee different ways to get some sort of reaction, and what you want it to be, right? Like what the goals are as well. Those are things I pay a lot of attention to, because those things are sort of what I think about when I choose to consume media. You know, there's so much saturation now. How do I divide my time? What grabs my attention? I think those are very key. And I think especially in this industry, you know, everyone says, right, it's, you gotta have talent or you gotta have money, right? And you gotta think about ways to align yourself with high-water money. But I think on the talent side, right, it's, you know, whether you're a writer or director, or you're a producer, you know, we need more talented producers who find the talent to work with and foster them and help do everything else other than writing and directing, which is so many other things. You know, I think that's very important to think about where you are aligned with, you know, those two very material things, because it serves you well in the long run, especially in negotiation, right? Know where your leverage is. You know, I know where mine is. It's just a fact, right? So I want you to know what yours is and what you're bringing to the table. Yeah.
You both touched on purpose and motivation, and I think that so often when women are involved, there is the misconception that we are purpose-driven and not commercially minded. And I think the data of recent years that show, you know, the top grossing films that were led by women or had women in some of the key positions did produce the greatest returns. And that's starting to create an awareness and an acceptance of the fact that women may be able to navigate purpose with profit better than we've seen in the past. And Deb, I'm curious as to whether or not that's something that you all talk about at Endeavor Content.
Yeah. And, you know, purpose right now feels extremely relevant, so it's a great time to have that as part of your narrative. When I'm negotiating on someone else's behalf, which, you know, is what I do for a living, I definitely go to them early on and talk about what don't you want to compromise on. So depending on what part of the process we're in, whether it's raising financing and we're, you know, looking for financial partners, Is it important to you that we're partnering with people that, are going to allow you to adopt the inclusion writer? Is it important to you that we're gonna partner with people that give you 50 days? That's a lot, but is it important to you that we don't compromise a certain aspect of your script? And, so I think making that clear to your partners, whether they're your representatives or your producing partners, that you're all on the same page is gonna be important early on. And then once you have a finished product and it's time to sell it, or at whatever point you are bringing it out for sales, it's the same questions, or similar questions. What do you want? What will we not compromise on? Is it going to be that you absolutely really want to see this in theaters, or are you malleable on that and you want to hear the best, most passionate pitch that has the most amount of money? I mean, once you're partnered with a financier, you're going to have to work with them together to, come up with that list of non-compromises. So, but compromise is an important part of it too. I mean, figuring out where to compromise and where to stand your ground is something that I would want to see women take a bigger stand on. I think a lot of the time we're very malleable, but I think the best way to go into a negotiation is with some pretty firm non-compromises.
I think for me, one of the biggest ones is the motto I always go to, you don't ask, you don't get. So if you really want something, ask for it. The worst thing you can hear is no, but then again, you didn't have it to begin with, so what are you really losing? So I use that in all aspects of life, not just business. But the other thing, sort of going to compromise and go to motivation, is I sometimes see in negotiation where the project and making the best film is no longer the purpose, it's the ego. So in that negotiation, are you negotiating certain things because you want them, and maybe, it's being too firm on the flip side of what you were saying?
Yeah.
Is it just like an ego-driven ask, or is it really serving the project? Because there's so many times where you start out and you, I'm sure, want a certain project and you want it a certain way, but then all of a sudden it becomes somebody's ego that gets in the way. And at some point it shifts and goes to the other side. So figuring out where that point is and avoiding that point is, I think, incredibly important. And also asking yourself throughout the whole process and making sure that you are adhering to whatever the purpose was from day one, and even though it's day 267, that purpose is still the same. I think that's really important. Because if you know that, then it will make it easier for you to negotiate and make all of your decisions along the way. Because you will know exactly what it is that you're going towards.
Really good advice. I'm having PTSD as I'm listening to you. So we have just a little bit of time, and I hope no one in the room knows why I've said that. But we only have a little bit of time left, and I think one of the key components of success is defining it. And we have the opportunity to script the narrative of women-led financing. And I would like for each of you to help create a definition of success that you think will ring true. I'll go first, because I had time to think about this. There was an article in the Hollywood Reporter last year, and the headline was 25 players that can actually get your independent film made. So, by the way, the word actually is a pet peeve in our household. Anytime a child uses it, we take out a stick. Because it's that super, micro-aggressive, you're an idiot, and let me tell you why kind of a word.
Well, actually.
So, on the list of 25 players, there were 4 women, and 1 woman who's married to a man, and that's why she was on the list, and she's lovely, but we're fairly at the 20%, we're kind of pushing 18, 17 there. So to me, a measure of success would be to get to 50%. We'll even take 40. Let's take 40. And I think we could do it by just getting the 4 of you on that list. So I've talked a little bit now. I've given you time to think. I'll hand it to Sheila.
Success. Here's what I'm going to leave you with. Don't ever, ever define yourself by what you own or what you do. Okay? You're successful because you're here. That's number one. And with that, know two most important things as women in film. You're unique, ladies. You were intended to be here. Period. You're here tonight because you're intended to be here and to share and to learn. So what's success? Success is what you wake up with every morning, you smile about, you get up, and you get motivated. But here's, again, what I'll leave you with and ask you to do. When you reach the top, send the elevator back down. I don't know how to follow
Anita?
I think, yeah, it's defining success for yourself is understanding that you've put your all into something that you're passionate about. No matter where you are on that journey, I think you sort of every day you wake up and if that's your goal, you put 100% into it. That's what I try and remind myself to do every day. And that's how I feel the most fulfilled. And those are the people that I meet where I feel like that from them, that tells me I want to work with them, I want to know where they're going. So, I mean, that's my answer.
Success for me after tonight is going to be finding something to work on with Sheila Driscoll. If I've done that by the end of the year, it'll be a successful year. Listen, I think where I sit, it's a predominantly male-dominated field, and I have a ton of male allies that I'm fortunate to work with. But for me, success looks like the ability to open more doors for women in so many different ways. I'm a new mother, and I've really started focusing on ways that we can support mothers and parents in general in this industry. It's very hard. It's just not something I think a male-dominated industry thinks about. So, I wake up every morning and think about what can I do that's a little more beneficial for another woman in this space. So that's how I'm trying to define success in 2019.
I guess I have the benefit of going last, so I got to go. I think success for me is seeing more people like me in the future and making things easier for the next generation. I'm a Latina, I'm a product of Cuban immigrant parents who came here with nothing. And something that I do now to foster that next generation is I teach film finance courses at my alma mater, Loyola Marymount University. So since when I was a student there, I was a business student, there were no classes related to any of film finance or entertainment or anything. Since then, they've started an entertainment finance class, and I mentor students every semester, and I also teach on the side as well. And that's important to me because when I was an undergraduate, I would have loved to have taken a class, and I would have loved to have learned what I'm now teaching, but I had to learn on the job. So I would like to make things easier for the next generation and see more women there.
Thank the four of you. What an excellent. Really an honor with all four of you. So, should we do Q&A now? Yeah. She says yes, and I'm going to listen to. What's your name?
Jennifer Manigan.
Jennifer Manigan is now in charge.
Oh, you can't hear me. I mean, that's a whole other story. All right, I'll stand up since you insisted. My question is, so for these meetings that you're going to have one a week with all the women of color, perhaps disabled people, people that aren't normally represented.
Absolutely.
Can I get on the list? Is there a list?
Yeah.
We can pass it around, because I think you'll have some takers in the audience.
Please come and I don't know if I have any colleagues here here, but we will take the names right now. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Okay, do you want me to get a list on? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, that would be a huge help to me.
I'm honest. Okay, I'm gonna put me first though.
You're
I'm
hired.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go right ahead, and then I'll look in the back.
Thank you, ladies. You're incredible. It feels very good to know that you are on our side. It's just an incredible feeling. My question is going to be very short and very easy. How do our projects end up on your desks? Thank you.
Great question.
Yes. I'll tell you what I look for. One, I want a script that's about 90 pages. If you give me one that's 234, it's going to go to the bottom of the pile. So one, I'm going to look at, are you staying within 90 minutes? For each page of script is about a page of film, right? And you know that. How soon is your point of impact? Is that, I think the master point of impact is Clint Eastwood. Very opening, 10 seconds on the film, bam, it's the impact. What's happening, we're already pulled in. I have to know that within the first page, you're pulling me in. The second, I'm there. I care about your characters. If I'm 20 pages into it and I don't care, I'm done. So really look at your scripts, because that's going to be kind of your first calling card. And I think the most important is now in kind of a new formula that I'm seeing is, and if women can start to think about this, it's a new movie every 15 minutes. You're literally putting 8 films into one. And this is where you're going to kind of set yourself apart. Why? Because that's kind of the content that's really kind of being looked at. So that's how it'll hit my desk. And your budget must match your script. I will go through it page by page. If you've inflated it, and I had somebody give me $100 million budget for a film in Egypt with $2 million of underwater photography. Really? There's water in Egypt?
I'm not going to make a joke about it.
So that's where it's going to land. It will. That's what I look at. She was going underwater.
And it's true that we were just talking about this before we came out, that the budget to profit ratio, the ROI, is more favorable always on lower budget films. So don't feel obliged to get your budgets up. In fact, the opposite. Question? Hi.
First, sorry. Obviously, this is incredible. 2 questions. Do you look at older women directors who've been around for a couple of decades, who maybe had success in their 20s and have detoured and come back? That's one. And 2, when you're looking at financing projects, obviously the script is the first thing that you look at, but how much script development do you all do? You know, if someone comes to you and says, look, the idea is solid, the reaction to the idea is fantastic across the board. We've been working on the script, it's not there yet, and we want to hire someone amazing to get it there. Do you look at projects like that? Is that a thing? Okay, that's it.
Well done.
I mean, at Endeavor Content, I think the short answer is only if you're partnered with somebody, with people who have, you and they have been able to do the work to figure out how much that's going to cost. Because at the end of the day, we have to look at like what's the financial paradigm here. Like, what are we talking about to get to the script to a better place? We don't personally develop. Our partners do. Your partners, that are with you on the project, ideally, if you don't have them that can help you develop, that you have a list of people you'd like to go to that can help develop. So I think it's important to think about when you're asking people for development money, like what's the next step right after and how much are we talking about?
we will develop scripts with older women as well. Back there. Oh yeah, yeah.
Hi, I have a question because you mentioned tax incentives and having gone through the process once in Louisiana, and grateful for the fact that now LA has sort of put back the tax incentives. Like, is it something that you want us coming to you already figured out already figured out where we're gonna get our maximum tax benefits, and because if you have the package pretty much ready to go, but like getting the doors open, like someone like me who has that process already in place, do I continue to seek out other avenues of financing, or is it a point where I can come to you like, okay, this is what I have laid out, this is the budget, this is this tax incentive I have researched and looked into?
Yeah, that's specifically what we do. We finance tax incentives and distribution agreements. So we actually join projects once they already have equity from these ladies or from anybody else. And we can even help you figure out where is the best location for you to shoot to maximize the amount of rebate that you get. So if you're torn between a few different jurisdictions, we can certainly run numbers on your budget, help you figure that out, administer it for you. But that's what we focus on specifically.
I just want to add one thing that I think is really important. One of the takeaways from tonight that I hope you can see is that there's a lot of collaboration amongst us. On the equity side, on the debt side, agency, across the board. None of us operate in isolation. So as you take your project around, keep in mind that it's a good thing that we all like each other and we're talking with one another, because together we will figure out how to get great projects made, how to give you your voice. So I think that's so important. Sheila, you were talking about collaboration versus competition, and yeah, there's definitely the nasty stuff, but it's really small, and we try not to pay attention to it. And this is what you're seeing today is really the picture of the future.
Do you guys, and specifically for you, do you guys finance international tax incentives or
Yes.
only US?
No, international as well. Yeah, sure. We've done South Africa, Canada, Australia. Yeah.
They're right there.
Hi, I'm Jen, and I'm an entertainment and a tech attorney. And I wanted to ask on behalf of my clients, is there a particular order that you guys would prefer clients approach you with their pitches? For example, Viviana, you mentioned it's debt financing, so we tend to go to you, towards the end after you've already gotten equity. Do you have a recommendation?
I'm very open because like I mentioned earlier, I also look at development opportunities. So it could be a book, right? It could be your life, So, but I think again, bringing up the purpose thing, right? Come, I'd like to know what you want, where you want to go with it. So I'm personally very open. Everybody does things very differently. That's why we all partner up on things. Maybe some people, we get involved earlier on and devote resources earlier on, and then we go somewhere else where we sort of piece it together. So we can sort of think about people you're going to with different purpose, right, and have an additive sort of approach.
I think also to add to that, I think it's also too important to tailor your pitch to the investor. So it's not only the order, but for instance, if you go to Sheila or Anita, you're going to have to sell them on the project itself. If you come to me, I'm going to ask you very different questions. I'm going to ask your finance plan, your budget, where you're shooting, do you have any pre-sales? It's much more business oriented. You don't have to sell me on your film. So I think that's also a very important thing to know.
Yeah. I think mine's a little broader. It's somewhere in the middle of these two groups because ideally a strong producing partner is part of the equation because we want to be able to look at it as a backing of that play, but we also are partnered with very strong producers and can make introductions, can be part of that equation and that introduction as well. So the purpose part is really important too. I think a passionate filmmaker is going to win over most people.
I do want to add though the budget component, even if you don't have a detailed budget done, even if it's very early on, you should have a framework and plan for sure, because it determines so much, right, who you're talking to, how you're going to get it made. Exactly right. Yeah.
I can just speak. I realized, first of all, thank you so much, ladies, for being here. Oh, it's so wonderful to hear your voices. I want to ask you, in addition to films, do you also consider television?
Yes.
Yes.
TV has a slightly different process, but the short answer is yes.
Yes.
And TV movies.
Yeah.
You didn't ask, but I just thought. I said TV movies. You didn't ask, but I just thought.
And live entertainment and digital.
Yeah. Theater podcasts.
Holograms.
I see.
I've been a little bit lucky in the sense that I've been able to raise funding for my last project and I'm still traveling for it. I just did my 24th national screening and I'm doing more.
Amazing.
A lot of what you said is what I did, but I discovered it by accident.
Okay.
And I was lucky enough to have a venture capitalist really take me through this. It was a guy, of course. But I'm now thinking about my next project, and I'm so hyphenated, I don't even know where to begin. I'm a professor of architecture, I'm an architect, and I've been thinking about working on, this is my project that I want to develop. It's mine, it's the one I've wanted all my life. And I finished the one that I did because it was tied to something that I cared about, and I finished it. Now I want to do what I want to do. And I was just wondering, how open are you to listening to something that is not been done or has been done or is a mishmash of things that I'm known for innovation. So I just wondered how open you were to doing something about that.
I'll just tell you right off the bat that our creative filters are to either tell stories that we should not tell, or to tell stories that we should tell in shouldn't ways. What?
I finished a feature film.
Yeah, no, so I would say yes, we are at level 4 very open to things that have not been done before. Anything unexpected is going to be, is expected from us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're also sorry.
You don't have to put it in a box, but you do have to be able to tell me what it is, you know, and how you want to see it made.
Someone in the back, right there, who's had her hand up.
Hi, I just had a quick question about, from the perspective of a newer woman in film, maybe with less experience, what would you recommend on the journey to the point where someone would be able to put something on your table? So how do we get there?
I'm going to give you one word and you're going to laugh. It's called LinkedIn. Honestly. Look us up, look who's in our network, look who you could possibly reach out to, and I invite all of you women to go back to your LinkedIn accounts and start to prune the trees. Go through and take out, it's like, who is this? And now what you need to do, and I think to all of my colleagues and the ladies' points, is really start to focus in on what you want. Who can help you create this network? Go ahead in the filter and put women in finance, women directors. You're going to be amazed who pops up. Look at, the acting community. Reach out to actors. Some of them are on there. I was amazed. I reached out to Doug Jones. He said, sure.
Okay, and then I walk by all this, the Star Trek stuff. But exactly, you're going to surprise yourself. So I would say do that. So then you're going to start to get closer, start networking, start talking, start emailing, and start asking. The ladies here very, very, I think drove the point home. If you don't ask, you don't get. And my great-grandfather taught me the size of your question will equal the size of your answer. So ask.
I think we're out of time on that note.